The next speaker is Dan Baronet, and he is the father of user commands, the right bracket user commands. And I have to say, I have become, after being a little bit iffy about user commands, I've become a big fan. So I think they're terrific. So over to Dan.
Thank you. Does this work? Yeah, okay. I should tell you that I am not the father of user commands. Morten is the father. I'm just nursing them. I have nothing, I'm just keeping them up there. Sorry? All right. But they were your idea anyway. Yes, so I'm just going to show you what happened to user commands in the last year or so. For the benefit of those that know nothing about user commands, I'll just spend a little bit of time explaining what they are. So user commands are pretty much like system commands. System command starts with a right paren. A user command starts with a right bracket. For example, the command save saves a workspace. The system command saves a workspace. The user command saves an object. System commands are case insensitive, so are user commands. System commands are provided with the system. User commands are provided by the user. System commands will take 0 or more arguments, so do user commands. For example, the system command wizID will take 0 or 1 argument. 0 returns you the name of the workspace. 1, it sets the name of the workspace. The system command copy will take 1 or more arguments. So the same principles apply with user commands. There is one major difference, is that user commands will accept what is called a modifier. A modifier is sort of another argument, but it starts with a special symbol. In this case, the case that we've chosen is a dash. For example, here you have at the bottom here, user command XYZ takes a number of arguments, and then you specify a modifier. This is not something you have with a system command. The character that is used for the modifier is up to you. In our case, all the system commands that we provide starts with a dash, just like in Unix. Under program control, you can call some of the system commands using system functions. For example, wizID is a system command that has a system function equivalent of wizID. You give it a string as an argument, and it returns a result that can be used under program control. The same thing can be used, it can be done with user commands if using quadec.ucmd. You give it a string which represents the command, the arguments, and the modifiers. It will return a result which you can use under your program. Like Morten said, then user commands are not new. They came in about 1990. They came in the APL PC product that SCSC was selling at the time. And they've been simulated in some other systems. So it's not a new concept at all. The original implementation used component files. We are using text files. So the implementation is different, but the principles are exactly the same. And we introduced the user commands 4 years ago in 12.1. The initial problem that the user commands had was a lack of parser. One of the things that you have when you have a user command is you have to make sense of the argument that you're giving it. Depending on what you're doing, you may have 1, 2, 3 arguments. How do you separate? What do you define where the arguments start and end? And if you have modifiers, are they valid? Are they acceptable? Do they accept the value? And so on and so on. So there was no parser at the time. And well, they eventually put that one in, but it was too late by then. Dyalog incorporates a parser that simplifies your life, so that you don't have to spend a lot of code trying to determine where your arguments are, where your modifiers are. Sometimes this can take more code than what you're trying to do. So we provide a parser. If you want to use it, it's available. And Dyalog ships with a number of user commands. We have up to 80-something at the moment. And they fall into various categories. Now, this year, there was a lot, up until now, Morten, John, and I, and some other people have been creating user commands. And we've given them names that we did our best. We came up with names, and we thought it was good. Fiona came on board this year, and her and I spent time together looking at the names of the user commands, the groups, because the user commands are regrouped into groups, and their modifiers. And she was asking questions like, why the hell did you name this way? And I didn't have a real good answer. So we came up with a bunch of names that we think are better. So we ran this by Morten. Morten was happy with it. So I'm going to show you what happened. So this is really what happened this year. There's a number of commands that have been added, but the bulk of the work was in the renaming and redefining the display of user commands. So, okay, so the new features. Up until now, you could tell the parser, I want to have three arguments to my command. And if you didn't supply 3 arguments, it would just not call your code. It would say, I don't want to do this. You have to supply exactly 3. This time we've introduced something that says I can have between 2 and let's say 6 arguments. So if you supply a number of arguments that is in that range, it will be accepted. Outside, it won't. This is a new thing that the parser accepts in this new version. You can also specify the length of the commands and the modifiers. One of the things that, for example, let's say you have the command delete, and there's no other command that starts with the letter D, then the user command processor will, if you just say bracket D, will understand that you're talking about the command delete. So you don't need to specify the all D-E-L-E-T, especially if the user command is very long. That's pretty handy. The problem is that, let's say that your command delete is very dangerous and does something that you don't want to do by accident. You may want to force the user to say, I want you to type delete completely, or DEL, or subset, or whatever. So you can now specify that you want to have a minimum number of letters entered to execute the command. And up until now, you couldn't specify default values for modifiers, meaning that if you had a modifier on the line, if you give it a value, it will take it. If you don't have a value, what is it going to be? What is the default value that you would have? You can now specify it. Now, if you want to know everything about the parser, if you look in Vector that has been given to you, the little red book that has been distributed, there's an article in it that describes the entire parser. So if you want to know more about it, this is where you're going to find it. Another thing that's been added is the ability to track the names and the time of the functions that you bring back from SALT. SALT is, as you probably know, a couple of programs that allow you to read and write APL code from file. And if you bring back a function into your workspace, you don't know when it was originally created. You may have saved it 2 weeks ago, but you've lost the time that it was created, who created it, and so on. When you bring it back, what happens is that it's created under your own time and your own user. So that information is lost. With V14, you will have the ability to restore this information. So it will be saved and it will be restored, and we'll ask questions a little bit later. I'll accept questions a little bit later. So this ability will be included with V14. We will have also encryption. We have encryption at the moment. We only accept, how do you say, Raindal? I can't, it's a bunch of letters that don't look this way, but I think it's the only method we have at the moment. We will have other methods in the future, but it's the only one we have at the moment. You have the ability to boot SALT with a function, which you could not do previously. You can only boot with certain instructions. This is a new thing. And when you debug user commands, one of the things that you can do at the moment is say, I want you to stop at the beginning of my user command so I can start debugging it. So that's a new thing that wasn't there before. Okay, so now we're going into the changes. Like I said, there were some changes of names. For example, the modifier -use, which was used in the commands open and compare, has been changed to using. So this is a very minor change. The command compare, which had a name called zone, because when you display things, there may be a zone before and after that shows you where the change was made, a little bit of code before, a little bit of code after, so that you can tell where the changes were made. This has been renamed to window. Like I said, boot is now, boot can accept the function to boot, not just the instructions as I told you. So this is a change also. And there's another thing that we had added previously, is that if you have omega in the, for example, I want to load a file and I want to use the same folder as my workspace, you could say omega to specify that. Now, there's some discussion in the company at the moment to get rid of omega, and we would like to replace it, for example, with bracket W, bracket or something like that. No decision has been made yet, but this is likely to change. So if anybody has any input on that, you could tell us about it. And for example, you can put it on the form or just tell us directly what you think and so on. And this applies to anything, any of the presentations. If you have any comments, just put it on the form and just put it at reception. We'll pick them up and read them. Like I said, there's a proposal to change that to bracket, W bracket. There's another thing also, is that you can specify load. If you say dot, that will represent the location where you are at the moment. Just if you start Dyalog and you're in folder XYZ, then if you say dot / file, this will work as in any other file system. It will use the current folder that you have. And if you say dot, it picks up the folder above. Okay. When you do bracket ? You get a list of all the user commands that exist. Previously, it was just a simple list, just like fins. It would display all the names of the user commands that were available. Right now, it will be shown differently. And what will happen is that you will have the name of the group and the name of all the commands in that group there. And the problem is that some of the commands may have the same name depending on which group you're in. For example, the command compare is something that is very common. You have fin compare, you have whiz compare, you have var compare, there's 5 of them. So in that case, you will have to enter, for example, in this case here, you will need to say salt compare if you want to do the salt compare command, or fin compare if you want to use the compare command, which is in the fin group. So you will have to make the distinction. You will have to prepend the name of the group. And this is what it's going to be looking like. So you can see here on the left, you have all the names of the groups, and on the right, every single command that belongs to that particular group. So for example, here in the group array, you have array compare, array edit, and to HTML, and so on and so on. So these are the 83 commands that we have at the moment. The groups, we have the group file, which obviously is related to files, the group fin, which is related to functions, ns to namespaces, ws to workspaces. We have the salt commands, we have some tools, even user commands related to user commands so that you can manage them. And some commands have been added, some have been changed, and some have been assigned a new group. So for example, in the array group, we have array compare, which was used to be called var compare. Like I said, you're going to see many name changes. All the red ones have been changed, and all the green stuff has been added. The group file, you can change directory, collect and split files. So you can take a big file, split into several smaller files, regenerate the file afterwards with the collect command. Compare files, edit files. So for example, if you have a text file that you would like to edit, instead of going to an editor like Notepad, you can just say bracket file, edit the name of the file. We'll bring it in, you can edit it, and then save it back again. If you want to, if you're looking for something in a bunch of files, for example, you're looking for certain text in your Dyalog files or some text files or PHP files or whatever, you can say find, you can even replace if you want. You can take the component files, a component file can have a timestamp. You can take that timestamp, turn it into human readable format. You have the touch, which will create a command, create a file. And you have a command to change a group of 32-bit files into 64-bit. This is what Richard was talking about yesterday. This command used to be named F264. It is now called 264. That's a small change, but good to know. Another thing too is that if you try a command that you were used to before, and it has now been renamed, previously you would get something like command not found. If it is a command that has been renamed in the scheme, you will get the message that this command not found, it has been renamed to the new name here. So you have a little bit of information. It's not working, but now you know which command to use to make it work. Function group, you can align the comments, find the calls that all a function makes. For example, if you want to know all the functions and the variables that a function calls, you can find it using the calls user command. The input is to get some many lines defin input if you want to. And by the way, if you want to get some help, you can always do bracket question mark, the name of the command. This will give you all the information about the command. Fun compare will compare two functions. Latest will give you the latest commands that have been modified, the latest functions that have been modified in your workspace. Reorder locals will just reorder the locals in your functions. Vocabulary will give you all the one-line defins in your workspace. Miscellaneous, you have a calendar, which gives you the calendar of the month or whatever month you want, the factors of a number from X to X, some utilities there. The NS group will allow you to update a script. For example, if you have a script and you've moved into it, created some functions, variables, and now you would like your script to be updated, then you can use the script update. And if you say don't, if it's already something that was in salt, then it won't be saved if you supply the don't switch. Summary will give you a summary of what's in a namespace or a class. Xref will give you a cross-reference of all the objects in a class or namespace, and the dash file will put it onto file if you want to. The output group is a new group which contains 4 commands, 2 of which are new. This is John's work. So boxing, display, and rows. So boxing, if you turn boxing on, then everything you type afterwards will be displayed this way here. If you say rows fold equal 3, well, you've seen it with Morton just before. So what happens here is that the output is displayed up until the last 3 rows there. And anything before that is cut off so that it fits on the screen. Wrap will wrap the lines instead of wrapping by block. I don't know if you've ever done this before. If, let's say you have a large matrix that doesn't fit on the screen, what will happen is that the first section of the matrix will be displayed and then the renaming columns will be displayed afterwards. With this system here, with this command, you can specify that each row wraps instead. So you have an example right there. Rows cut will cut off at the end of the screen, so whatever is beyond will not be displayed. The group performance contains some user commands to do. This is those were there before. It's Applemon, monitor profile, mostly Morton's work actually. And time has been renamed to CPU time, and it does compare using John's format with a little graphs and everything. So if you have several expressions, you want to know which one is fastest. Instead of having to copy CMPX from the defense workspace, you can just do time, the expressions, dash compare, and it will do it. The salt group, these are the same commands that you had before. The clean command was called uclean before. It has been moved into that group. It basically cleans up your workspace and removes all the tags that you have on all your objects so that your workspace is no longer salted. If you put delete files, then any files associated with these objects are also deleted. Open using was called use, it's been now called using. Salt compare, the same thing. The samples group, we had some samples before to allow you to see how to create user commands with the parser, without the parser, how to use the help. They've all been renamed. It's exactly the same commands, they've just been renamed. The SVN group, for anyone who knows about subversion, we have cover commands for all these, all the subversion functions. They were all called SVN something. Now they're part of the SVN group, so you don't need the SVN anymore. So they've all been renamed in a way. The tools group, we have assemblies that shows you assemblies in in your workspace. Demo, you've seen demo before, but now it works under Unix. DMX shows you the latest error. File association used to be called EFA. So now if you have several versions of APL that you want, when you double click on Dyalog, you want a specific version of Dyalog to open, then you can do it this way. And GUI props, which is Ray's command, I think, that was yours, right? GUI props? Yeah, and it's still there. Transfer group, we had 4 commands before. We had in and extended, out and out extended. They've all been merged together. There's only one command now. So if you have something from APL2 or APL 2000, something like that, that you've used the out command on a workspace, it created a file. You bring back the file into Dyalog APL. You can use the in on that file. It will recreate the workspace in Dyalog APL. It may not work, but at least you're going to get the bulk of the work done. Out is the reverse. The benefit from out is that you may not want to go to APL2 with it, but you may want to go to previous version of Dyalog APL. So if you have, for example, 13.2, you want to go back to 13.1, you take your workspace, you out into a file, you read it back in 13.1, it will recreate the workspace there. The user command groups themselves, we have, they haven't changed. You can debug, you can enter debug mode, you can load a user command, you can create a new user command, you can refresh your workspace with all the new code that you had. You can reset your cache, you can have a setup so that when you start the user command, something happens. And if you want to get the latest user commands, you can do update, which will go out on the server, get you the latest user commands, and bring them back into your system. And version will tell you which version you're running, so that hasn't changed. The workspace group, lots of renaming there too. There was something called WizDoc, has been named document. That's basically the WizDoc that displays all your functions and variables in your workspace, cross-references and stuff. Find references finds all the references that are in your workspace. If you have any loops and things like that, it used to be called ref. It's called find refs. Fins like hasn't changed. It tells you all the functions that like a certain pattern. WizLocate was called locate. Locate was called WizLocate. There's a new feature with that, and that's something that allows you to call back a function whenever you have a match. So, for example, if you're looking for a certain pattern in your workspace, and every time this pattern is found, you want to call your own function, you can say, well, every time I find something, here's what I found, give it to your function. If your function returns 1, it will be displayed. If your function returns 0, I'm not showing it. So that's a small change, but it can be very useful. Map is a new command that John wrote. It displays a mapping of the current workspace or namespace. Names like is like fins like, except that it's not just functions, it's everything in the workspace. Vars like is only the variables. Size of gives you the size of a variable. WizPeak allows you to execute code from another workspace into your workspace. Basically what it does, it creates a namespace, brings the code in, executes the expression, gets rid of the namespace. So that's something that may be of interest. And finally, WizCompare, which was called WizCompare without dot, allows you to compare 2 workspaces. And that's pretty much it. Let's see what we have after that. Yeah, so as you can see, most of the changes have been related to renaming the command. There haven't been many additions. It's mostly, from now on, there shouldn't be any more changes, at least we hope. No major changes like this. So that's it. Any questions?
Dan, some of these names are rather long, and my spelling is not so hot. Do you have a system where I can start typing the word and fill in the rest of it?
No. But like I said before, if you type the minimum number of letters, then you don't need to type the entire thing. For example,
that's what I
file
meant.
association.
I can do that.
You can do that. If you just say FIL, then it's probably going to be enough. And if it's not, just try the E after that.
You mentioned something about quad AT. When you bring stuff from Salt,
yes,
you don't get the original timestamp.
Correct. Yes.
Would this allow us to get the original timestamp?
Correct, yes.
Ah, thank you.
Yeah.
About the same problem. To do that, you had to put something new in the interpreter, I suppose.
Correct.
And you can publish this because other people have other similar way to store a function outside the workspace.
No, I'm not doing this. No, just kidding.
Ah, I will put the question in a different way at this point.
No, it's going to be a general feature that will be available to everyone.
Thanks.
Dan, you had mentioned that the general philosophy for all this was to bring something into the workspace off of a script file, execute it, and then watch it disappear. What's the overhead associated with that, and is there a switch somewhere to sort of keep it in memory if you're going to repeatedly call it?
No,
so you don't do the overhead.
Yeah, user commands are something that you want to use, a tool that allows you to save you the copy, bring it in the workspace, execute, and erase it. This is the type of situation that's going to save you time. If you really want to do something which is going to be more permanent, then you should copy it using copy or load or whatever, and work with it, save the workspace, and reload it later. Yeah.
So I want to thank you for the box on, box off. That's something that we use a lot. Okay, so thank you.
The work of that man there.
So I have another request. When I do a funds, if I have a very large list of functions in my namespace, they all tend to ravel together, and if some of them have long names and some of them have short names, they don't all line up nicely. So we wrote our own little utility that will put them out with proper alignment, so it's so they're all like aligned nicely. So is that something that you could add as an option, like boxing, to have as a default switch that we
Well,
can
if you use fins, bracket fins, I think that should do it. I think it's already lined up.
Okay.
Square
Yeah,
bracket, fins.
Okay.
Yes.
All right. Well, I'll try that. Thank you.
Yeah, give it a try.
While we're on funds, a very small little thing that would be rather nice. When you do funds, say B, you get B and all the rest of them. It would be awfully nice to be able to say funds B and get just B, or have a range that I could choose.
Bracket fins.
And that'll work on that?
You say bracket fins, for example, B star or B star X or whatever, you give it a pattern and it will give you all the names that match the pattern. If you don't give it a pattern, it shows you everything.
Right.
It's the same with
Sometimes
var.
you just want to look at a subset.
Yeah, subset, then it
Beautiful.
will do it.
Thank you.
And vars like is the same thing, and there was another one, names like. We're good? Okay, thank you.